Hey there, coming to you here from my office rather than live because we had a little bit of technical issues like we did last week. This week didn't work well. We've found a way around some of that in the weeks to come, but want to make sure that we are able to present to you, those of you who could not make our sessions live, our Path to a Healthy Life series. And this week we are talking specifically about healing occurs when we bring healthy spiritual grief to our sense of loss. And it's kind of a hard week, especially if you've been in grief. You're coming out of grief. You're going into grief. You're in the middle of it because of a sense of loss about something in your life. And we want to talk about that because handling our losses well, emotionally, relationally, spiritually, understanding that loss is a part of the cycle of life is an important way of being healthy. So let me pray very quickly here, and then let's just get into it. Jesus, we just pray that our hearts are open to you as you are the comforter. We turn to you many times in our life when we feel a sense of loss and grief. And so we just praise you for the very fact that you are there for us in our loss. We would... I don't know how we would do it without you, Jesus, actually. So help us to have the ability to discern and learn as we do this together. Amen. Well, let's get at it. My notes are here in front of me as we go through this. I want to make sure that you understand that this will be a little shorter than normal because it's just here. But I want to go over this material with you because I think it can help us all. So, loss. Let's start with loss. Loss is a really important concept that we got to understand. That it's just a part of the rhythm and routine of life. We won't always gain. We will lose things. And I know sometimes you're saying, "Oh yeah, well, weight loss, that's a good thing." But I think we all know that there's many things in life that we lose that are painful, that go anywhere from just frustrate us, like I lost my keys for a bit, or I lost my credit card and need to cancel it and get a new one from the bank, to the loss of a loved one. I mean, it just runs the gamut in the way that it affects us, affects our emotions, the way we process it. So I want to talk a little bit. Again, this is just going to be a very large view, very, very high-level view of this material. But we want to look at that in terms of how am I, what path am I on? Am I on a path to deal with my loss in a healthy way? And so that's what we want to get at. Loss can cause us to shrink into ourselves, to withdraw, to find a place where we just kind of turtle in with our feelings and our emotions, and to shrink back from being active and out in the world. I know that's true, man. Some of the hardest losses I've felt are the ones that make me shrink back from life the most. I have eventually emerged, but I've done that several times in my life, and I know that to be true. But there is a potential in the middle of that to enlarge our souls. So while I think I might shrink back from being engaged in the world, I can allow Jesus to enlarge who I am, the soul that I have, because he's at work in me. And that's those first blinks there. He can enlarge our souls through loss and grief. We're going to talk about both loss and grief here. Loss marks the place where self-knowledge, where I can become so much more aware of who I am, so much more informed about who I am in the middle of loss. Loss is a very important teacher in our life. I learn about how I handle my pain. I learn about how valuable things are or are not to me by how deeply I feel the loss, for example. So loss is a very important place where I can learn about myself. And as such, because there's so much self-learning there, it's also a very powerful place of transformation. Don't think that transformation only happens in the good times. Much transformation, important transformation, in us happens through our loss. Change brings loss. We're going to talk about that a little bit, but that's why, because I'm changing. I change through the loss. That's the transformation. Loss is, what is loss? Let's define that for how we're going to talk about it here. Loss is literally the experience of something being taken from us. I will argue that it will also, sometimes we feel the loss when we give something. But it's usually when we have to give something that reluctantly. If I give something readily, I'm happy to let it go. You know, if I've got a bunch of garbage laying around the house and it's stinking the place up, I'm happy to lose it, man. Get it into the garbage can. You know, get that thing out from under the sink and get that thing into the garbage can outside. That's a loss I'm happy with, right? But when it's something that's forced on us, when it's something that we're reluctant to do, or when it's something that's just pulled from us, that's loss. It's a feeling of something being taken. It's not the thing that we wanted to see go. And it can be an activity or action that can either be real or perceived. Loss can be a perception. It doesn't have to be real. I can feel like something has been taken from me. I can feel, for example, that you've taken away a sense of maybe my autonomy or my freedom. Now, maybe it's not true, but if I feel that way, if I feel like that's true, then I'm going to experience the sense of loss that goes along with that. That's perception loss. Or it can literally be, you know, I've lost my car in an auto accident and I'm not sure how to replace that. You know, that's a very real sense of loss. We could lose dreams. I've done that before. A loss of a dream where I thought I had this and it was something I really wanted, and I feel like it'll never be attainable, and so I have to let that go. That's a loss. It could be a loss of our routines, our stability. It could be a loss of our potential. I'm getting older. You know, I'm trying to get in better shape these days, literally, health-wise. But I was sitting there trying to do, you know, the first time I was trying to do some crunches, right? I was like, oh man, I remember high school. I could knock sit-ups out till, you know, as old as the day is long. I'm like, I can barely do a crunch anymore. You know, I can barely do a sit-up. I'm so out of shape. There's a loss, you know, right there. Now I want to gain something back, and I think with a little bit of effort I can, but I do feel that loss. We could lose maybe even something that we held dear. Like maybe as we grow and we mature in Christ, we lose or let go of our old ways of thinking. Old ways about thinking about who God is, or old ways of thinking about who we are as a church, or what's right for life. Those are actually positive things, but can create a sense of loss. Maybe like innocence lost. Or of course, there's always catastrophic loss. And this just scratches the surface. So many different ways of having loss. In many cases, the more we pour our hearts and souls into something, these things that we're talking about, the more we invest in these things that we're talking about, and those are your blanks there, hearts and souls, the more profound or deeper we feel it. So that's why family members and the loss of them, whether it's a move or a death, is so profoundly impacting us than something that maybe we didn't put a lot of, you know, value on. Maybe, you know, you lose something that's kind of sort of maybe, you know, important to you, but not so much. And you can go, well, I feel that. I hate having to maybe replace that the loss of that thing I used to do that always broke down. Let's say you used to, talking about cars, your favorite car. And, you know, you love that thing, but it's just a place where the mechanic says it's more expensive to fix it than it's worth, you know. And you're going to feel a sense of loss there. But not as much as the other stuff. So won't belabor that. I think we all understand that. Also, finally, another idea here, a loss may be deserved, like being fired for cause, that happens, or completely undeserved, like a friend ends up moving away. And that's a loss we're going to really feel. Loss is real, right? We've all been there. We've all felt it. We've all experienced a sense of loss in our life. Our culture routinely interprets loss as something that's unknown. It's a thing it's alien, it's unwanted, or it interrupts my normal life, right? Loss is not something we plan for. Loss is something that hits us sideways. Loss is something that comes at us very unexpectedly. And what do we do with that? A lot of times, if it's deep enough, it can derail us. Even for a while. It can knock us off the path that we're on. Like, we might be on a path that we feel like it's a pretty good path of life right now. But that loss comes so profoundly to us, it just knocks us sideways. And we have got to recover. That's why divorce is so huge. So it's one of the reasons why I think God really doesn't like divorce. Because he knows it throws us for a huge loss loop. I mean, there's other things there. Don't get me wrong. It's more complex than that. But that's a sense of loss that most people take a long time to recover from. It's feeling like you're going on. This is your blank there. That everything is just fine until something happened, and you can actually maybe even fill the blank in there on your notes. Like what's that thing that goes in the blank? What's that loss that you have experienced? What's that loss that you feel like has happened to you? And you're like, that's been a tremendous loss in my life. And I wasn't expecting it, and it came sideways, and it hurt, and it was painful. Loss is always emotional. Loss is always painful. Wish there was a different way. Wish we could get around that. Wish that there was some other, but there's not. It's tough and it's painful, and so many times because of the pain, we don't deal with loss well. We deal with loss in some very unhealthy ways. We like we're on this path, right, and we get off the path because the sense of loss that we feel, like I say, derails us, and we just go we take a left turn and we go sideways in our life. Let's talk about some unhealthy ways. You'll see those blanks here in your notes. The first one is denial. It's like, I don't even feel like, I don't even want to talk about it. Didn't happen. It's like, it's not a big deal. It really doesn't bother me. I've felt that way a long time about some early childhood loss. And, well, part of me knew that there was an impact there. There was a big part of me, because things that other people had said, because honestly I was in survival mode and making it work, or thought I was. And so people would bring up, do you need to deal with this loss from your past? Nah, I'm good. Denial. It was far from good. It wasn't good. I am now finally starting to deal with things, much more profoundly and intentionally. But boy, there was decades where I would just deny. No. Denial is when we refuse to acknowledge some painful aspect of our reality. We just can't bring ourselves to bear it, to say it. Denial. And that's a very unhealthy way. Probably one of the most unhealthy ways. If you deny something, then you can't even approach healing. And it's going to take you off on a bad path. Trust me, it will. It does impact our lives in negative ways. So that's something we need to be able to do, is be self-aware to say, yeah, this hurts. It's a loss. Another way that we deal with loss in an unhealthy way is that we minimize it. We might say something like, I'm not an alcoholic. Yes, I drink every day. Yes, I drink uncontrollably sometimes. Yes, I drink automatically. Yes, I drink a lot by myself. And when we start to list off things that, but we're not. It's okay. I can handle it all. Or we say something like, anger's not an issue for me because I rarely blow up. And yeah, we don't realize how often and how badly we blow up. So we minimize it. So it's it's not denial, we admit something is wrong, but we do it in such a way that it appears less serious than it really actually is. That's minimizing, and that's very unhealthy. Number 3, blaming. Blaming, it's not my fault, it's your fault, right? We find another source to put the justification, the reason, the causality for it on, and that becomes the focus. So I might feel the loss, but instead of dealing with my loss, I start to blame you for it, and or blame another for it, and it takes my focus off of the loss completely away. I can't deal with my loss appropriately because I'm so focused. Maybe there's anger, maybe there's unforgiveness. We take away any of our own responsibility for our behavior, and we project it all onto others. And that also is a very unhealthy way of handling loss. Number 4, we rationalize it away. We figure, well, it's the sour grapes approach. This thing must have been, okay in the long run, because that's just the way bad karma, and obviously as a believer in Christ, I don't believe in karma. I believe in His will, His purpose, His work in the world. So I do believe there are consequences for our behaviors, both negative and positive. Those are curses and blessings, but I don't, believe in karma. When somebody dies and we feel that loss, oftentimes we try to rationalize it away. Well, God needed, a carpenter in heaven. God needed him more than we did, and that's just bad theology. That just doesn't make a lot of sense. I don't know if I see that in Scripture. I understand why we say that to each other. We want to try to find a place of comfort, but it does rationalize the loss. And if I rationalize it and let that part of my brain take over and don't feel it, then I can't heal from it. So, number 5, the 5th unhealthy way we deal with loss is addictions. I don't know that I need to define that. Anytime we take a behavior to an extreme and it becomes something that our brains get wired to crave or need, that releases a sense of dopamine, where it gets hardwired into my head that I need this thing, and I can't survive without this thing. That it becomes an addiction. It doesn't matter what it is. It's usually something that wires us, which is like a coping or forgetting mechanism. So I do these things, and I don't have to think about it anymore. I don't have to feel it anymore, and I constantly crave that. Well, that's addictive behavior. It's the worst of all the coping mechanisms, because I wire myself to need something that's actually unhealthy for me. Talk about getting off a healthy path. Addictions can be very, very hurtful to us. I think we kind of know that. It's unhealthy, it's harmful behaviors, and we find pleasure and joy and relief in ways that don't help us. Number 6 is avoidance. That's for the people who want to just stuff it, right? Just cram it down inside. I don't want to have to feel it. I'm just going to bury that thing. So I just stuff my feelings. I stuff it, I escape it, I forget it. There's always time to deal with it later. So I again, rationalize it or justify it by saying, I'll just come at it later. And that doesn't work or help us either. Finally, the last one here I want to present is distracting. It's the people who say, well, it's there, but let's just focus on something different. Let's just focus on the positive. Squirrel, where something else grabs my attention. This makes me feel good. I'm just going to go do this. I'm just going to go do this hobby. And I'm just going to go immerse myself in my work. And that's a distraction. While having things to do in loss is good and important, not to the point that it distracts us from dealing with our sense of loss in a healthy way. When we're distracted, we want to change the subject. We engage in humor. We change the subject, whatever it is, so that we don't have to deal with it. Well, the result of the way of doing it like this is that over a lot of years, over a prolonged period of time, we become less and less human. Not the kind of human that God created us to be. Let's put it that way. We feel that part of ourselves, it diminishes us. And for those of us who follow Christ, I think we actually become a shell as a Christian of who God intends us to be. Jesus himself felt much loss. His death created much loss. Of course, he rose again, and that brought great hope. But we're not there yet. So, when we go down these unhealthy coping paths, the only way that we can make people feel like we're doing well is that we put those masks that we talked about in prior sessions on. We put the mask up. We make sure that everybody around us feels like we're doing okay. And so we want to project that to the world, and then inside we deflect, or we rationalize, or we blame. And then we try to make it all look good. Believe it or not, even within the church, there are unhealthy ways to deal with loss. Some well-meaning pastors or friends may say, well, you just need to pray more. You just need to go to church more. You just need to worship more. You just need to listen to the Christian radio station more. You need to read your Bible more. You need to rejoice in the Lord always more. And when that doesn't feel like that quite fits, because while all those things are good things, they don't by themselves. All they do is they're just more to-do lists that masks us really dealing with the pain, the reality of the loss. And so then when those things kind of drop off because we don't feel like they're helping, then all that spiritual guilt and shame comes on us. And we feel like I've completely messed up here because now even the Christian things aren't working for me. I know people who have experienced a great sense of loss, blame God for it, try to do this stuff. It doesn't work for them because they're not on a healthy path toward dealing with their loss, and end up leaving the church and just kind of doing their own thing and just kind of turning their back on God because of that struggle. And it's heartbreaking because that's not how God wired us to do this stuff. We can allow loss. So let's turn this, to what are we going to do here? We can allow loss, death, to either crush us, to kill us, to wipe us out, to drain us, or to open us up to the Spirit of God and the new possibilities and the depths of transformation that can come. And all it requires is us finding the path towards a healthy way to deal with those moments of loss. And so that's where we're going to go to next. And we talked about hope just a second ago. The hope lies, there's a healthy grief. So that's how we deal with losses, through healthy grief. There's a healthy grief that can give us hope in our lives, that we can walk through the valley of the shadow of death, as it is, and still not fear, and still be okay, and actually come out the other side better than we might have imagined. So, let's talk about that. To move forward, we must attend to healthy spiritual grief. That's your first blank if you're doing your worksheets. We move. It's not that we have to do the grief checkoff boxes. I got this, I did this, I did this. These stages of grief that we hear about, I got those, I checked those off, and I'm all good. I don't think that's the way it's going to work. I heard it put once, and I loved it, that with the Holy Spirit, in the Holy Spirit, that we move with our grief. Because depending on the loss, grief is going to look different each time. Depending upon where you are in your journey with Christ, depending upon, a lot of different factors, that grief may look a little different for you. So we want to move with the grief and let the grief be a real part of us and help it to heal us and the hope that comes with that healing. So what is grief? Let's define that term as well. We did loss. Loss is feeling like something's been taken from us. What is grief? Grief is the natural emotional process when we experience loss. Generally, the greater the loss, the greater the grief. So there are some healthy ways and some healthy things that we want to do when we start to grieve, when we start to feel, let ourselves feel that pain that comes with the loss. Number one, pay attention. Don't ignore it. Don't check out from it. Don't transfer it. Pay attention. Pay attention to how you're doing. How am I feeling? We can become more self-aware to be able to know how we're feeling. Get a sense of a vocabulary of grief. Find a way to express to someone, even yourself, or into a journal or whatever. I'm feeling this today. I'm feeling this at the moment. I'm feeling really frustrated. I'm feeling, like I just want to sit and cry. Or I'm feeling a profound depression, because of this loss. I'm feeling something. So it's how are you doing? Find a way to articulate your feelings. Did you know that nearly two-thirds of all the Psalms in the Bible, there's other places, but just in the Psalms alone, two-thirds of the Psalms are laments, are somebody who's in pain, the psalmist who's expressing some kind of pain deeply and is trying to say, I want to tell God, this is my feeling, this is why I feel this way. I want to get it out, and I want to get it out to you, God. That's okay. Get it out to God. Get it out to others too. Don't just limit it to Jesus. Talk to Jesus about it and talk to others. Many of the prophets, especially in the days where Israel and Judah were not doing well or under attack or in the exile, would express profound feelings of loss for what the country could have been, should have been, was in its past. And we see that all through the prophetic writings. And it's like, how do we find God again? Fortunately, there's hope, right? All through the prophets, he's like, but I'm going to have a remnant. It's going to be okay. I will restore you. Life will be better. That's a message that we can hang on to. Even Jesus expressed sorrow. I mean, he was fully human as well as fully God. And so in his humanity, we see that he would feel compassion for people when they felt loss. Jesus would feel sorrow when something bad would happen. That famous verse, Jesus wept, when it talks about, Jesus feeling the emotions around him about the death of his dear friend Lazarus. Jesus was very much that way. Number two, so that's number one. Pay attention. Pay attention to how we feel and be able to express that. Number two is as a healthy way of moving with our grief is to wait in the confusing in between. Wait in the confusing in between. What does that mean? It means we resist quick fixes. I've got to make myself feel better. How do I do that? I'm going to go on a shopping binge, for example, or I'm going to take a vacation. I'm going to spend this money. I'm going to go on a walk, like a serious walkabout. I'm going to take off for a month and travel. And those are all great things. Shopping can be fun. Shopping is sometimes even necessary, but not when it's used as a quick fix. Even the church stuff can be a quick fix, where I just, I'm grieving, so I find a way just to jump into everything that the church has, and I jump into the services, I jump into worship, I jump into prayer, and it all sounds like, oh, that would be really good, but it bypasses the need for us to sit with our grief and with Jesus so that we can heal. There is a in-between, between the moment of loss and where we feel like God has brought us to a deep sense of transformational healing. There is an in-between that can be confusing and painful and uncertain, and we can't bypass that just to get rid of those feelings. And that's really important. That's really crucial. We have to embrace the not knowing in that space. We have to embrace the idea that that there's mystery there. And there's a mystery to what God is doing there for us and in us. And it's okay not to understand it. I'm going through some things right now, dealing with a sense of loss from decades ago. And re-letting Jesus walk with me in that space. I don't know how it's all going to work out. I don't know. I mean, I know it's all going to work together for my good eventually as Jesus does his work. But day to day, how Jesus is going to approach that with me, I don't know. But I will trust him in the in-between. And I will not move any faster than I feel Jesus is moving in me. And that's the secret. I know this one's contrary to our normal ways of thinking, especially in our culture. In our culture, we want things quickly. We got to be in control. We've got to have answers. We've got to be on top of it. We can't be a disappointment to others. We've got to make life make sense. But in the end, it's likely we'll only find part of the answers that we're looking for if we do that. All right, number 3. Embrace the gift of limits. So limits are a type of loss, but they're actually a gift. In other words, sometimes we need to change a perspective. Sometimes we need to reframe what's happening with us. So I get older, my body doesn't do what it's supposed to do. Sometimes my brain tells it I want to do something, and it's just like, I'm not quite sure what you're talking about, buddy. You haven't kept in shape enough to do that. I have more limits now than I used to. You may have all sorts of different kinds of limits. And we sometimes see those so negatively. But what if we reframed those? What if we found a gift in what we would consider a loss of limits? Let's talk about some limits here. For example, the physical body, disease, aging, its function, our abilities, right? All that with our physical stature. Our family of origin, we lose, there's genetic limits, there's opportunity limits, how we were brought up limits, the things that we were taught, right or wrong limits. We call those scripts. We run those in our lives. Those all become limits. And sometimes I can supersede those. And sometimes those are just boundaries, limits that are in my life. There's how intelligent I am, my giftings, my time, my energy, my education is a limit. My experiences are a limit. The relationships I have are a limit. There are limits to us as humans. And as we become aware of them, we become aware of the loss of something that I can't do as well as others. These limits really, we see them really when we compare. That's when we really become aware of these. When I compare myself to some other guy, some other worker, some other pastor, some other Christian, some other father, some other husband, and I start to compare myself with them, and I see where I fall short, and I see there's a limit. I can never do what they do. I'll never, play basketball like Michael Jordan, used to do, or I can never, whether it's athletics or whether it's certain sports or certain hobbies. I just can't, right? And so, what if we see those limits as a gift instead of as something bad? So sometimes we can see that there's opportunity in loss. There are times where I know when I've lost employees that rather than see that and be discouraged about that, I see as an opportunity to rework things. It opens things up and says, well, what if we did it different? What if we thought about it different? Let's take a look at that. Let's look at the opportunities that are there. That's a really healthy way to begin to deal with the grief. I still grieve the loss. Things may have been working really well, but that doesn't mean that I'm going to let the loss disable me. right? I can see that there's a gift of limits. So we accept it. And we accept that we can only do what we're able to do. We can accept that we can only adjust up to so much, right? I only have so much training, so much experience, so much education, so much skills. So I can work through that. I can surround myself with people who can do things differently and participate with them, but I can't do it by myself. And so anyway, embrace the gift of limits. Number four, increase in humility. And in the packet there's a Benedictine ladder of humility, the ladder of St. Benedict. But loss gives us a chance to grow in this way. Like loss gives me a chance to transform and say, God, it's really about what you're doing in my life, not me. I can't control my life. I can't control everything so that I don't lose anything. And God, you're in control. And that begins to be a way towards humility. And so I put that up there. I'll I'll go through it very, very quickly. That ladder of humility, it's like humility grows in us. We don't just, it doesn't just turn on or off. Humility is not a switch. I just flip it, Well, okay, I'm humble. Here we go. Thanks. I woke up humble today. It doesn't work that way. I have to grow in my humility. And St. Benedict's ladder of humility is an example of how that may work in our lives. So let me go through that with you. Step 1, that there's a fear of God and mindfulness of Him. It just starts with, well, I'm not my own person, that God is there. And He supersedes. He's over me, right? He's creator. That's number 1. Number 2, that doing God's will is what's important, not mine. So now it's not just that I know about Him, but that what He wants is more important than what I want. The third one is that we're willing to subject ourselves to the direction of others. Now, I don't just look at it vertically with God, but I look at it horizontally with other people. That there is a really important step that I'm willing to take direction of others because I can be humble. I can come alongside them. I can align myself with them. Number 4, patient to accept the difficulties of others. So once we start really submitting to others, we're going to find that they may not at times measure up. Have you ever, do you remember, let's put it this way, do you remember the first time you saw your parents' humanity, right? Your mom and dad is really human, that they are not perfect, that they are going to make mistakes. It usually works like this: I'll never do that like them, right? The heroes, sometimes when we see our heroes as human, we see that they are also, that they have difficulty too. And it's when we learn to accept that that's okay that we grow in this step of humility. When I see the pain and loss of others and be okay with that, so see how this all works and ties together. Step 6, that we become deeply aware of how sinful we are. I mean, profoundly sinful. I used to really have a hard time saying that. I don't anymore. I hope I've grown in this area where I can be honest and say I am a sinner, sometimes a horrible one. But Jesus doesn't judge me by my sin. He judges me by my faith, my belief in Him. And so what He does is He disciples me so that I can be more aligned with His will for my life. And I want and need that. But I'm okay with saying that, and I need that because I'm a sinner. That's important. Step 7 is speaking less. I then can become less important and listen to what others have to say. I'm going to tell you, this is one I still struggle with at times, because I sometimes think I got a lot to say. It doesn't matter. Other people have great value, and what they say matters too. And learning to listen more and speaking less is a way towards humility. And then finally, step 8, transformed into the love of God, where I just love people, no matter who they are, how difficult they are, how frustrating they can be. I just love people. And letting them see the love of Jesus is all that matters. So, wanted to bring that to you. So you can fill that in. Let's go to number 5, the 5th way of moving towards healthy grief. And that is letting the old birth the new. And this was the idea of opportunities that I was talking about. So that's the blanks there, old and new. Letting the old rebirth of that. Not just the things that are new that we get to do many times stand on the foundation of what the old built. And so what we can grieve the loss of the old. The new comes because the old has forged something in us transformationally. For all those who have been through a divorce and have a beautiful second marriage, that's what we're talking about. That something new comes and is forged on the foundation of something painful and old. But there's something about that you wouldn't trade in because of what was done in you, what God did in your heart and in your life has radically transformed you to a point where the second chance, this new opportunity comes at great cost, but also with great value. And that's super important. Jesus turns losses into wins. He heals brokenness. He restores us. And that's the way that works. As we kind of just bring this session to a close, I want to say that the central message of Christ is that suffering and death bring transformation. Bring resurrection and transformation. Those two things are both what happen with a sense of loss. That hope and a spirit of joy can be resurrected inside of us, at the same time transforming the very person that we are as we are more conformed to the nature of Christ or to the Spirit of Christ rather than to ourselves and our false selves. Resurrection always follows death. You can't have resurrection without it. Resurrection must precede death. And death is loss, and resurrection is life. And like I tell all my students, the greatest value that God has in this world is life. So, I want to encourage you, let healthy grief be the path you take with the loss that you experience in life. And let that be God's path of transformation and growth and beauty in your life. Right? Love you guys.